welcome to the MarkeTech Group's Minute podcast interview. Today we're discussing the challenges facing medical device companies in lieu of today's economic, regulatory, and competitive dynamics. Joining us today is Cary Adams, the founder of ProXimal Ventures, a firm that invests in medical device and technology companies. Cary was the founding president of the Sacramento Angels and is the former chair of SARTA, the Sacramento Area Regional Technical Alliance, where he now leads its MedStart program, the medical device and healthcare IT group. Cary has invested in 14 seed-stage technology companies, 8 in the medical device and technology space. Those companies combined have gone on to raise over $150 million in venture capital from over 30 VC firms. And Cary, I want to welcome you to the interview today.
My pleasure to be here, James.
So, Cary, historically speaking, medical device manufacturers have benefited from sort of a build-it-and-they-will-come approach in a market that at the time had limited competition, had very strong profit margins, and very fast continuous growth. And if we fast forward to today, things appear to be much more challenging for medical technology companies. Carving out a niche application with strong therapeutic value to the patient does not seem enough anymore. Even as you said in your blog, there seems to be a perfect storm brewing in the markets where competition is much more fierce as medical device suppliers are chasing the same healthcare dollars. We have buyers that are increasingly concentrating their purchasing power with GPOs. Insurance companies and CMS are scrutinizing pricing practices. And, of course, regulatory compliance is becoming much more challenging with greater focus on efficacy, not just safety. And then, of course, we have the new excise tax possible coming in the next few years. On top of all this, we're in the midst of one of the worst U.S. economic recessions. So our first question to you, Cary, is as a medical device company investor, do you continue to be optimistic, and do you believe medical technology companies can overcome current pricing pressures?
Well, optimistic is an interesting term. I guess I consider myself a realist, and you're absolutely correct that we're facing a different world today, and that new technologies face challenges that they haven't in the past, and that appear to continually be evolving. If you think about how prices are set in competitive markets, where buyers contend with sellers with directly conflicting economic interests and arrive at a mutually agreeable price, and then try to think of that in the context of the healthcare industry, the model breaks down at several places. The manufacturer of the new device has to persuade a clinician that the new device is superior, has to contend with frequently with the hospital's pricing committee, and then the group purchasing organization that the hospital participates with in order to negotiate through the ultimate price that will be paid by the hospital for the device. At the same time, the manufacturer needs to realize that payers are increasingly active in reviewing what gets paid for. And in that context, there's increased interest in looking at the overall cost of healthcare, but the structure of healthcare is so complex that, unfortunately, I would say that the current state is that the complexity of the decision-making process is hampering the movement toward innovation. I would say that I remain optimistic that innovation has the potential to dramatically improve healthcare, to make it safer, more effective, less costly, and more accessible through technology. But especially in the United States, with healthcare reform and with the FDA regulatory process undergoing a multi-year process of transformation, we have an environment where there's a paralyzing effect to the process, which has the effect of driving away early stage venture capital. The president's report on jobs, middle of last month, an interim report by the Jobs Council detailed that the amount of venture capital going into early stage medtech companies fell by 50% in the first 6 months of this year, and that the percentage of venture capital going into biotechnology generally dropped from 18% to 12% from 2009 to 2010. That's makes it very challenging for new technologies to get to market because the investors who have fueled that in the past have been discouraged by the regulatory climate. The same report details that the industries are booming in Europe and in Asia, where we're not subject to the same healthcare reform issues and the same regulatory, FDA regulatory issues. So in one sense, we're losing our early stage medical innovation industry opportunities to overseas due to the existing climate.
Very interesting. So, again, from an investor's perspective, what are the types of things that you're looking for with regards to a startup's potential success and financial forecast, given some of the headwinds that they face today? And has it changed at all from what you looked at, 5 years ago or even 10 years ago?
Well, it has changed, and I think the way I would characterize venture capital today is looking to fuel business development for products that have already made it through the approval process and have already started to generate sales. For products that are looking for earlier stage funding, it's largely been drying up, and I think that's kind of the area in which I've focused, and so I would say that's a very dramatic change. I was grateful that the president's report included some data on that because, to some extent, Washington has been in denial about the effect of its policies on the innovation ecosystem, and I think that they're quite obvious to those of us who are out trying to raise money and are involved in multiple new product development processes. I find it very discouraging today for new product development to find funding. I will say that angel investing is stepping up to some extent. I think it's possible to get money out of angel investments. I think also that people need to pursue a much more frugal approach to early stage product development to try to get a lot more done on a lot less money in order to, and the trend is clearly to take new product development overseas where processes are not quite so subject to change and not quite so complicated. Interesting.
So you touched on a couple of key factors already with regards to some of the factors that are preventing new growth in profits. And I'm wondering if you could help us identify what are the one or two key things that need to change in order to continue strong growth and to allow current and established companies to continue to generate the profits that they have in the device industry so that they can continue to reinvest those profits in new product development?
Well, I frankly don't see much in the way of new investment by existing companies in new product development. I think that if you look at the big MedTech companies, they have very large sums of money, but they are spending it not on product development in-house, but disproportionately on acquiring new technology developed elsewhere, where someone else has taken the risk of product development, regulatory risk, reimbursement risk, and market risk. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing acquisitions at a later stage for products that are that represent already proven technologies with at least symbolic sales in, say, one or two countries in Europe, or some some regional marketing successes in the U.S. that someone can come in and say, well, if we put $20 million into marketing this product nationwide or globally, we can, it's easier to calculate what the product will be worth with that last $20 million or $50 million, whatever it takes. So they're not putting the money into early stage product development, except there are some strategic investment funds. There is some in-house development, but there's been a growing trend for new product development to come from the sort of startup world, what you can call the innovation ecosystem. And that group is suffering a drop-off in funding of historical proportions over the last 3 years.
So does that have any long-term consequences for more established medical device companies if current startups are drying up, funding in early stages drying up, essentially that new product development funnel that you just touched on? Seems like there would be fewer opportunities for buyouts and acquisitions of new products long-term.
Well, I think that for them, for the new products, there's definitely a dampening effect on new product startup funding, early stage funding in the U.S. today, which will have an impact several years from now in terms of new products ready to go to market coming out of the U.S. At the same time, you're seeing the innovators go overseas to bring their products along. So I think what is happening is the innovation is going overseas. The big medtechs will continue to have choices for acquiring new technologies, but progressively those will be technologies that have initially been developed and introduced to market in overseas markets.
Okay. So to continue on the point about overseas developers, in your opinion, how real is the threat of lower cost overseas suppliers with regards to competing against U.S.-based medical technology manufacturers, whether they're startups or more established companies? Is the threat of lower cost devices that we've seen in more regular things like automobiles and consumer electronics, is there a threat for that lower device market to come to the U.S. and affect U.S.-based medical device companies?
No, I don't see it as similar to just achieving efficiencies in manufacture, like in cars and TVs. I see it as, and I think in terms of when products are going to come to the United States, they're primarily going to be brought to the United States by the existing cohort of established big medtech and pharma biotech companies. So what is happening is that it's faster and cheaper to develop a new product in Europe, and so people who are serious about pursuing those innovations are moving parts or all of their people and operations, clinical trials, regulatory approvals to Europe. And once it's approved in Europe and sufficient clinical data is developed to introduce it to the U.S., that's when the products will come to the U.S. And I don't see much risk that from what we've been discussing as lowering the price that the big med techs will be able to charge in the U.S. I think the challenge to them will be ongoing efforts at cost containment in the U.S., which have largely been ineffective, but which continue to grow in terms of pressure. I think when policy efforts to contain costs are ineffective, they tend to make the process more complicated. And so we have a complex, very complex pricing system in the U.S., and efforts to contain it are progressively making it more complex. And so it's not working, but it's progressively more complicated. And the kinds of complications that you will see that haven't existed in the past is that there's increasing desire for cost effectiveness in data, comparative studies, and the like. Our industry is very fragmented, the healthcare provider industry, and so the incentives of, well, who enjoys savings from cost effectiveness, a more cost effective device, may or may not be the same person who makes a decision to use it. If you take stroke therapies, for example, only a very small percentage of patients receive any therapy to, in effect, reverse the stroke, to reopen the vasculature. If you're able to reopen the vasculature by thrombolytics or by thrombectomy, you can get much better results. And so stroke treatment is a big opportunity for saving money by intervention. However, most of the cost, what happens when a patient suffers a stroke, most of them don't get any treatment to attempt to reopen the blood vessels. They then go into rehab, which tends to be very expensive, and they lose productivity due to their own disability. And the price tag of that, just the cost of the rehab has been estimated at $57 billion in the U.S. If you have a new device that will pull a blood clot out of the brain and reverse the effect, you may have a miraculous result for the patient who is basically restored to good health. But you ask the hospital to pay for the device, which they haven't been paying for before. The savings comes to the system in rehab costs, which may or may not be provided by the hospital itself. So you have this strange mix of incentives where the whole system could save lots of money with better treatment, better results for patients, and vast reduction in rehab cost. But it's not in the the financial incentives of the existing delivery system may be, and not necessarily. It depends on the system in question. May be adversely affected by it. If you are delivering the rehab costs and getting paid for it, then eliminating the rehab costs has a negative effect on your own financial performance. And while people don't make decisions explicitly on that basis, decisions get made faster if financial incentive is aligned with, doing the right thing.
Right, and certainly cost and cost effectiveness is a huge point across the entire healthcare industry today, and of course it's probably one of the industries that's being most scrutinized in the public eye today, due in part to the ballooning healthcare costs that America is currently experiencing. So as it relates to more established companies, if we switch a little bit from startups to more established companies, each year CNN comes out with a profit margin index for various industries, and of course healthcare and medical device and medical equipment are always ranked close to the top. And the most recent index that they came out with, they said that publicly traded medical device and equipment manufacturers on average had about a 16% profit margin. So given the current scrutiny, given the current challenges facing existing medical device and equipment manufacturers, given a 3 to 5 or even 10-year time frame, is the 16% profit margin, is that realistic on average for this industry moving forward?
Well, I think it is. I think if you have a patented technology that is proven to be better and becomes the standard of care, in theory, you have the ability to charge what are similar to monopoly pricing. Mm-hmm. So if you develop that and can get it to market during the life of your patent, you can charge a higher rate. And there continue to be examples of drugs that get repriced dramatically, 10 times or even more times what they were charged before, just sort of arbitrarily taking advantage of IP protected right to exclusive distribution. There's what I would say is that the increasing complexity of the way policymakers approach healthcare eats into the time frame that a patent will remain in effect, and I think the threat to the pharmaceutical and device industries comes from drugs going off patent and patents expiring generally, so that greater competition can come in and drive down the margin. So in that sense, yes, those treatments that are standard of care today that are patented, those patents will someday expire, and others will have freedom to introduce similar knockoff products. You have the challenge of regulatory approval on top of patent. You need to show that your device is, you still need to get it approved, and then you have the question of, well, does the new manufacturer what does a new manufacturer need to go through in order to prove its own device when it's just a knockoff of an existing device? So yes, the profit margin that exists because of the patent is subject to a time limit. Mm-hmm. The opportunity for new, better devices is not shrinking. I would say that the opportunity to improve things will continue, and new innovations can come along that succeed and will justify that higher price. What is harder today is to get any new technology into the market and selling, and that's become more challenging, in part due to U.S. policy evolution.
Very good. So, Cary, to summarize some of the key points that we've talked about today, both from the startup world and from more established companies today, give us your quick 5-10 year crystal ball forecast of some of the bigger changes that we can expect in the medical device and technology industry.
Well, I went back to Washington earlier this year and attended some meetings with congressional people, and a physician as part of our group asked when things were going to get sorted out and move forward with meaningful healthcare reform. And the person we met with said, well, people are just waiting to see what the results of the next election are. In terms of whether we continue to move forward toward accountable care organizations and the vision of healthcare encompassed in Obamacare, or we're going to go in a very different direction. Both of those options are possible, and with some, we can ask politicians or political analysts what the odds are, but without knowing which way the U.S. is going on healthcare reform, it's very difficult to look beyond that next fall's election, and that will have significant effect on the policy that is a fundamentally important component. If you assume that the movement toward accountable care organizations will continue, and it has a lot of momentum in the industry independent of the policy issues, I think what you're seeing is greater reliance on cost-effectiveness data, the need to include that type of analysis in the initial trials, and I guess I'm becoming a little pessimistic that things don't seem to simplify very much. They just tend to get more complicated, and that makes for a more challenging process for bringing new technology. I guess the big trends are it's likely to continue to be a European and an Asian story as the place to go to prove out new technologies. I personally would like to see people start measuring the opportunity cost of lost innovation. The FDA, I think, and the press overvalues negative outcomes, but undervalues the cost of missing out on innovation.
That's an interesting point.
If we don't get new technology in the U.S. until a year or 2 or 3 after it's in Europe, you can start to assign costs to that to our patients who miss out on that care. And there's just a growing number of new breakthrough products that are being approved in Europe many months, even years before they're approved here. And I think I'd like to see people start measuring that cost and talking about it, because in my mind it's a much bigger cost than people understand, and ought to be part of the equation. That's not really an answer to your question, but it's more what I would hope to see happen, because I think it's important.
Yeah, and understandably so. So, well, Cary, we're going to stop there. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insight and personal experiences as an active investor in the medical technology community, and hopefully the continued growth in innovation does continue and isn't halted, and hopefully the right changes come about. So I want to thank you again for your time.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
You bet.